it'll be a different URL.
Hi, LinkedIn Live community. It's Mark Halpern, CEO of WealthInsurance.com. Welcome to another Philanthropy Friday for July the 19th. It's great to be here, and it's great to have the summer, and it's great to have an amazing guest that I'll be introducing shortly for this event. It was obviously a very popular subject because so many people registered for it. I'm very grateful to be able to host all of these professional advisors who join us, people in the charity space, philanthropists, and just voyeurs to learn about the latest. Oh, great, we're working. By the way, I have to start off by saying sorry. We had a serious technical glitch with LinkedIn and Restream, and we just found out that we're live. So thank you. So we're really delighted to be able to bring all these people in together to showcase the latest and greatest in terms of philanthropy strategies, profiling people and events, and really making a community of interested and passionate people about the philanthropy space. So I've been in professional practice for 33 years. I'm on the professional advisory boards at Sick Kids, St. Joe's, St. Mike's, Humber River Hospital Foundation, TV Ontario. We do a lot with charities and we do a lot with donors as well. And what we found is that there are a lot of professionals in the world who do tremendous tax work. We've done presentations to the top accounting firms and law firms, and they're outstanding at tax mitigation up until here. But there's an entire shelf above with philanthropy that they're really not aware of, or they're not speaking to their clients about. So that's really what we're here, is to share a lot of wisdom and knowledge together. So before we bring on our guest, Mark Borkowski, there is a chat bar on this dialogue. If you see it, please send a note and just say hi. We're live and you got it. And if you have any questions at all, we'll do our best to answer those as we go along. And we have Cindy Himmelstein, who's my director of Planned Legacy Giving, and she's here to connect us with some things along the way as well. So just some pre-housekeeping. Our corporate mission is threefold. One is we want to educate and all professional advisors across the country and charities that they should be incorporating strategic philanthropy into their clients and donors' estate planning. And I'm not talking about, sponsoring somebody who's riding to conquer cancer to Barrie for $18. We're talking about being able to convert taxes to charity and create legacies. The second thing is we specialize in tax-exempt life insurance. People carry a lot of baggage around with that, not certainly in the high net worth side, but people know what insurance is. They don't properly understand what it does, and we're trying to change that. And the last piece is we're trying to create a national network of 100 charities and professional advisors that if each of us are creating $10 million a year, and that's 100, that works out to $1 billion a year. And that's not like pie in the sky. It's like crowdfunding. So we're really proud of that. And we've have already a couple of dozen who have joined us. So please join us along the way. It would be great to have you as part of our community. Now, why do I do this? If you know who Simon Sinek is, if you don't, please Google him. He says it starts with your why. And what's our why? My why is the word tzedakah. Tzedakah is a Hebrew word that's often mistranslated as charity, but it actually means justice or righteousness. We have an obligation to give back if we have to the social causes that we care about. Over the last 2 years, we've created $120 million. That's my dopamine. And people ask, why do I share all of this? Why do I, some people are very territorial and they don't share they're not sharing. And all I ask is that if you are successful or you have done something, please share your success with us. That's really what we want, and that gives us the greatest pleasure. Last couple of things in your what you need to know. Well, we all know that taxes have just gone up. With the new budget, the inclusion rate for capital gains went from 50% to 2/3, which means more tax and less strategies available, certainly because the government's pulled back from surplus stripping and non-CCPCs, etc. So what do? So, first thing is you should know that charitable donations can be used each year to mitigate up to 75% of net taxable income and can be carried forward for up to 5 years. So, some people will actually collect those donation receipts and use them if you have an exit, as we'll see from a business, to use that to mitigate some of those taxes. But the part that most people don't realize is that in the year of death, charitable donations can be used to mitigate 100% of estate taxes, including going back the prior year. So think of it as for every $2 that you give to charity, you save $1 of tax, which is fantastic. The other thing is life insurance can be owned and paid for by a charity, private foundation, or donor advised fund, which really means that if you have money sitting in a foundation, you can go ahead and use that money to fund an insurance policy owned by that charitable foundation or that donor advised fund to create even more money for that charity, or create a cash flow through the use of the dividends or the cash surrender value. But that's a little bit too much detail for this moment. We went through a whole thing dealing with the AMT, the alternative minimum tax. The good news is there's no AMT on death. And the last message that we really want to give across is that people are still giving cash checks and credit cards for charity. And we just want everyone to know it's the most cost and tax inefficient way of giving. There are far more better ways to give that we've identified, probably 25 others. So that's really what we're trying to educate our constituents with. So with that being said, I would like now to introduce, finally, Mark Borkowski, who is first of all, probably, Mark, you're there. There we go. Hey, Mark, welcome. Can you hear me, Mark?
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
I can
So
hear
I
you.
won't.
Now we can.
Good. Oh boy. So I just want to say that Mark Borkowski and I go
It's
back.
working.
Yay. So Mark Borkowski and I go back probably 35 years ago, at least, maybe longer. And
35.
yeah, 35. And he's probably the most connected guy I have ever met. He's kind of a force of nature. He's at every event doing his thing, which is networking, marketing, and helping people, because he's actually been involved in over 1,000 exits in terms of buying and selling businesses. So we are so fortunate to have one of the preeminent experts when it comes to buying and selling businesses, and we're going to be going through that today with him, and as a result also learning about how once you do have an exit, you can actually create an enduring legacy by converting taxes into charity. So Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
It's so great. Mark, I don't think I over exaggerated everything on what I just said about you, but tell us, how long have you been in the business and why in this
I've
business?
been doing mergers and acquisitions after an exit from the company that I had co-founded with my partner, Simtech Automation, which didn't end well for me because we parted on bad company, but the company was sold. I've been doing mergers and acquisitions. Originally, I wanted to buy a business after I'd exited, but I didn't. But I put two clients together. So I've been selling private mid-market businesses now for 36 years. And the key, what the community don't understand is there's an incredible amount of money looking for very, very few good opportunities. There are over 40,000 private equity groups in North America combing the market, looking for investments and acquisitions. But Mark, maybe we should talk about how this all starts. So someone who's contemplating the sale of their business, they're retiring, they're moving to some other opportunity. It has to start with non-disclosure agreement. So if someone's going to share any information with me, let's sign a non-disclosure agreement so that we have an understanding that anything said between us is going to remain confidential. Once we get that established and everybody's accepted that agreement, for anyone contemplating the sale of the business, they need a valuation. So you can go to a large assortment and groups of people that do valuation. They charge exorbitantly in many cases and give you a hypothecated number. If there's a serious seller of a business, I'm happy to do a valuation at no cost, no obligation, it takes between 3 and 4 hours. But if we've qualified, we've had a couple of conferences, and we have a serious prospect, let's do evaluation. From the evaluation, we can determine whether there's any further questions. About weeks ago, very large company, 78 years of age. His partner was 82, not operating. He brought his accountant, been with them from the very beginning for 52 years. He brought his wife. That we had a 5-hour. We take the financial. I don't take financials in advance. So they're tabled at the table. We start working from scratch. 5 hours into this long, arduous session, and all of a sudden, I slid the financial statements back. I gave him sort of a very tight range evaluation. I talked about all the options of how the business might be sold, and he jumped up, older gentleman, bad knees, crossed his arms, and said, "You have to leave now." So, oh, okay. Got everybody. And the wife got up, took my jacket, and said, "Can I use the washroom?" He just pointed. So I went to the washroom. The accountant followed me, and I said, "Gee, that didn't go very well." Well, he said, "Well, yes, because Harry's looking for 3 times that number." Wow. So it starts with, are we on the same wavelength? Conditions. And today, it's essential. And Mark, you know this, that unless people have used their small business capital gains exemption, we have to sell the shares of the company. Now, there's all kinds of issues around sale of the company, but there's 2 main issues. If you are selling assets, you're going to be taxed at the full tax rate. That's 52%. That's the insult. There is an injury to this. Now, in an asset deal, technically, you have to sever all of the employees. Anybody that has the title of manager or anything senior is entitled to 1 month for every year. I mean, I'm talking to people that have been in business for 50 years, and they've got employees that have been with them for 30 months for each employee. Wow. Potentially. That's outrageous. So it's a true case. So
that's if you have a share sale. Right.
Well, if we have a share sale, each shareholder is entitled to, as you know, it's going to be $1.2 million, technically tax-free. So if we have 2 shareholders, 1.2, we can spread that out over the course
that's the
of 5
lifetime capital gains. Right. That's called the lifetime capital gains exemption for business owners, right? You have to have a CCPC, right, in order to do that?
Correct.
Mark?
That's correct.
Right. So you have to have a CCP.
Lifetime capital gains exemption.
And in order
$1.2 million by the end of probably September. Yes.
And you said, yeah, unfortunately you're freezing. Like I don't think you have a very good connection, so it's not very stable. So
keep going.
You can multiply that. My understanding is you can multiply that $1.2 million lifetime capital gains exemption amongst other family members, but also not everybody's going to qualify for the $1.2 million capital gains exemption. Is it not true that people have to set themselves up in order to be able to qualify for that? Apparently there are 3 things that you have to be aware of, correct?
Go ahead. You know them. Spell them out.
So the 3 things is that the company has to has to be an active operating business, right? So it's
correct.
So they
have
to have,
correct. Number 1.
And the second thing, my understanding, is that they have to own the shares for 2 years prior to the exit. And the third thing is that 90% of the assets, and the 90% of the assets have to be in active business operations as opposed to investments inside the company. And without these things, you could actually get yourself cut out. Okay, good. So how often, like how far in advance, if somebody is interested, and it's a good thing you mentioned about Harry, because obviously the seller has a number, he wants to get the biggest amount, and the buyer wants to get the smallest amount, right? So how far in advance should somebody be investing time in advance of a sale in order to make sure that they get the best value from that exit?
Mark, it's a 2-year. If people haven't set up an estate or a trust, it's probably a 2-year process. you have to have set, it takes at least 2 years, at very least, even with all the opportunities, in order to establish a proper estate and proper trust, as you're well aware. So people who haven't done that tax planning, I mean, we send them back to school and say, look, you can proceed with the sale of the company, but this is not going to be a tax efficient deal. It's not what you get, it's what you keep. So it's essential that people, if they're contemplating the sale of their company, contemplate the fact that they're going to sell shares. And secondly, do their planning. They should be talking to you about establishing an estate plan, whether it's using insurance or any of the other variations, and either maybe developing a trust. It depends on, it's expensive to set these vehicles up, but the tax savings are substantial. And there's no reason why a company seller can't do that. This is about generational wealth, of being able to spread the wealth over the next generation and beyond. However, I would tell you that the vast majority of people that we encounter, and there's people in their 80s at the moment that have been holding off and not selling, have not done their planning. And that's going to cost them significantly. They've got to plan, and it takes possibly up to 2 years to establish all of that. And there's
Yeah, as a matter of
plenty of
fact,
people.
I was just with a family yesterday that there's something called an estate freeze. Like, let's say
Yes,
you want to freeze the taxable value of a company and pass along the growth in the common shares to the next
correct.
generation. This family had done a freeze at about $5 million for the first generation, but the second generation, through a trust, had a growth of now over 300 million. There was a tax bill there, potentially of $140
There
million.
you go.
Again, you can plan for the first generation, there's planning for the second generation, but the most important thing is you need the planning. You need to have the planning done. It's very
It's generational wealth.
right. So how many?
Discussing generational wealth.
How many businesses are there, Mark, in Canada, where they're saying that in the next 10 years, let's say, or the next 20 years, there's going to be some sort of an exit? I mean, most people's their net worth is made up. Their biggest aspect of net worth is private equity, I'm sure. Do you have any idea
Absolutely.
on the numbers?
You know, there's been books written as far back as 10 years talking about my generation. I'm 69 years of age, exiting the door. Guess what? They're not. I'm talking to people in their late 70s, in their mid 80s, who are still contemplating desire or not to sell. I mean, for whatever reason, people have not transitioned. So again, my client base at the moment are people who are way up in age. They're older than I am, and they haven't done their planning. So you send them back to ground zero. Say, you look, unless you do your planning, your tax planning, estate planning, you're going to pay a ton of tax. Your next generation and beyond is not going to get the benefits. So whether they're 82 or 84, we start the process from the beginning. And that's part of
Fantastic.
the planning.
Good. And
But
do
for
you
those that
advise
have
Martin?
done that, here's how the process
Yeah,
works. Evaluation. We're on the same wavelength or pretty close. Now, what do? We have to put a package of information together. We prepare a teaser, which is completely blind based on the information that we pull together in what's called a confidential information memorandum. That could be 50, 60, 70 pages of a lot of data. Everything is in there. And since we buy data, I mean, it costs us a great deal of money to buy it through various databases like PitchBook and SourceScrub. We attacked everybody in the world in those niches. So we're selling a company that manufactures the tips of pens. We can find out every manufacturer in the world, the CEO's name, the CFO's name, their email addresses, complete description of the company, and some credit background. Now, if we've got that mandate to sell, we've got a teaser. We send the teaser out to 4, maybe 500 international companies, large company or small. And sending out 400 or 500 teasers automatically brings back a very large response. We then study that response very carefully. Say, who are these that people have responded? Who do we want to sign a non-disclosure agreement? Who do we want to share information with? So maybe of that 400, we've gotten 40 solid leads back, and we've decided, we know, we've screened, we've studied. Now we're down to maybe 19, 18, 15. We've sent out non-disclosure agreements to all of those that have been approved by our client because he knows the industry. Those who've signed a non-disclosure agreement then get the confidential information memorandum. All the information, for the most part, is contained. However, people in the industry come back with questions. So immediately, we will get questions that'll come back in droves. And what I do a little bit differently, some people call it frequently asked questions. Anyone who's talking to us, if somebody's asked questions, I will go back to them and say, I had a discussion with Harry, my client, and here's some additional information. Here's some additional information that you should contemplate. The more information you give to these individuals, certainly the much better. So it starts from that. And
it starts from that. Okay.
Believe me, the objective is to create an auction environment that we get a number of bidders bidding, most logical suitors. Look, the vast majority of the 100 buyers for every deal, there's 98 of them that want to buy the company with the owner's money. They want vendor take-back notes. They want notes, which means if people selling their business are looking for cash for the most part. So we're looking for groups that have captive capital. We're inundated by certain groups that are called funders. These are people that leave university that are told, go find a deal. Somebody will finance it. Some owner will give you his company. Wrong. Then there's a group called the independent sponsors. These are people who come and say, I have a backer. Well, all right, let's keep talking. Who are your backers? Give me written confirmation. Some say, well, I'll give that to you when I get a letter of intent. Not interested. There are pledge funds. These are people, are sophisticated people who come forward, they put a deal on the table, and they say, subject to financing. Subject to financing, However, they try to tie the deal up for 90 days, and they run around trying to get financing. They are the LBO, leverage buyout dreamers. That's a subject of an article I wrote, LBO dreamers, people who want to buy companies with the owner's money. In 2019, Mark, the U.S. and Canadian private equity, you know what? COVID came and went. You paid your pension funds fees, you paid your insurance fees. That money sat in these pension funds that have to put the money out. Today, as of January, there's $3.1 trillion of dry powder. Guess what? Surprisingly, all these private equity firms, private equity now own close to 31% of all U.S. companies. These are pension funds, insurance fund money. 31%, 32% had to give their money back to the private equity, to the insurance and pension funds, because they couldn't put the money out. The reality is there's a lot of money and not a lot of very good companies to buy. But companies sitting, people, owners sitting saying, who'd buy my company? Well, if you do it properly, there'll be a lot of buyers at the highest value. Many owners get a call from somebody because, you know, the industry today have callers, people saying, do you want to sell your business? So the first person walks in, more than likely is going to be LBO dreamers, tangled up in this process and realize that they're doing probably a very bad deal. So you want to do this professionally. No cost, no obligation to do the valuation, a very small cost to do this information memorandum, and an international search or a very, very focused search. The very best fit pays the highest value, best terms, best conditions. And it has to be a share deal. Unless somebody's used their capital gains exemption already. Can't do an asset deal. I mean, it's
now
from a tax.
Who would want an asset deal and who would want a share deal? Like who would what?
Well,
what would
I mean,
be
if you had a series of lawsuits, if you had a series of lawsuits, any lawsuits coming up, they, even with all the exclusions that you can have in a share deal, people will say, look, there's too much confusion here. You've got lawsuits, you've got environmental problems. That's not our problem. That's your problem. We'll buy assets. Well, you've got to find somebody that's prepared to take on those risks. Maybe there's a discount in value. But, walking away from the small business capital gains exemption and having to pay severance, are you kidding? We have to do a share sale. So the majority of deals that I'm involved in, the vast 99%, we work as long as it takes to do it properly, because it's not what you get, it's what you keep.
Mark, it sounds like to me like
There it
you are
is.
really the Sherpa. It sounds to me like you really are the Sherpa for these business owners. Like it's not like you're just, like you said, like a private equity company just looking at the numbers and chop, 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 slice, 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 and figuring out a way to get the company for the least amount of money or getting other people's money. How often are most of the people you're dealing with people who are actually going to be acquiring the business and actually operating the business, or are going to be taking over? So it's an older person, now they're being sold by a younger person. Perhaps that older person didn't have family members, and now you've got somebody coming in who's has experience in that business and can leverage it up.
Listen, you know what? The number of private buyers that buy businesses is insignificant. I mean,
Really?
even a small business of 5, 2, 8 employees, any individual coming in, the vast majority of individuals don't have do, re, mi. So selling to a private individual who's going to try to get, and the majority of these people are looking for the vendor, the seller, to provide financing. Why take the risk to big vendor take back some sort? And they're trying to spread it out over 5 years these days. Why take a transaction that says, well, we don't believe you're going to meet your objectives next year, so let's do an earnout. An earnout says we'll pay you if it comes. 3 ways to do an earnout, and they try to sucker you into let's share profit. So we'll share profit. We're going to give you a bonus to what we're going to bridge the gap in value. So let's share the profit going forward. Well, guess what? The buyer, no matter who it is going to load up the company with new employees, new assets. Suddenly, no bottom line. Not a good way to go. Many deals are done that way by amateurs. Number 2, you can share the percentage of the gross margin. So this gross margin might be 38%. You're going to get a portion of the gross margin. Bad news is, from a financial reporting standpoint, unless you've got a very astute auditor, very complicated. The only way, if there's going to be an earnout, is going to be based on a royalty off revenue. So if the revenue went from X to X plus 2, you're going to get that gap. And a proper earnout has no floor, no ceiling. So if we exceed, we get more. But we can't guarantee the fact that if we said there's going to be an earnout of $3 million or $2 million, we can't guarantee. We will take the ceiling, because in many cases, under new ownership, suddenly the valuations and the revenue jumps. Look, there are very sophisticated private equity firms, and I can think of one in particular, bought a company at $18 million in revenue, 18 acquisitions, soon to be 19, by the way, moved from $18 million in revenue to $600 million in revenue. The original
Wow.
owners that maintained an earnout made a heck of a lot more than if they had just accepted cash. But here's the new way of how deals are being done. The majority of the private equity and strategic investors want the owner to keep at least 10%. They want to tie the owner in. At 20%, I assure you, with the right partner, in 4 years, with your 20%, you will get more money from your 20% and more proceeds than you did right up front with the valuation. With the right partner who's going to
Wow.
drive the business forward, private equity firms are charged with growing, making efficient. I mean, sophisticated investors have to give a return to their investors. So they make a lot of changes, but they make the business more efficient. They bring in systems, proper accounting, proper banking relationships, and they grow the business. So if the owner sticks around, look, the owner may not want to work in the business any longer, but he can be available 2 hours a week. We had a bad phone call with our supplier. We bring Harry back in on this call on the Zoom. Harry, what do we do? We pay him for 2 hours of consulting. He's playing golf in Miami or wherever, but we're paying him for the 2 hours of consulting. He's also a small shareholder, or a shareholder of whatever size. He gets proceeds. He sits on, he participates in meetings, he gets financial reporting. He can give us opinions. Those are the successful transactions. The people that are looking to exit 100%, very tough. I mean, many of these companies in the year 1, year 2, get into all kinds of debates. One other thing that I do, which is very different, I get paid when the owner of the company gets paid. If it's a 2-year payout, you know why? Because 65 to 70% of the time, an issue always comes up, Mark. Something comes up and it's serious. So the buyer says, some large corporation in Cleveland says, hey, that buyer says, well, or seller says, well, what can I do? You know what happens? People say, let's talk to our lawyers. As soon as the lawyers are involved, no more money flows. If there's a problem, I know the buyer, I know the seller. I mean, they've trusted in me in this whole process. I get in the middle of it and say, look, how can we settle this issue? Let's get past this. Let's get past this.
Wow.
And
Wow.
when they get paid, I get paid. I stick around.
Wow.
And that's how
Sounds
you
like,
build a long-term relationship.
right. That's why you've been in this business for almost 40 years, right? That's the
36
reason.
years. You've
and
got to work with your clients. You have to help them prepare. This is not it's not a real estate sale. And by the way, this process takes at least, if we start today, we've done all our work up front, we've done the valuation, it's going to be a year to find the ideal buyer. This is not a 3-month or 4-month or 6-month affair. To find the ideal partner, the ideal buyer, internationally, North America wide, Canada wide, wherever our target market is and whatever the size of the business, it's going to take close to a year, sometimes longer. But it's worth the effort because we brought the best fit to the table. Ideally, as I say, we're creating an auction. We want 3 or 4 groups bidding against each other. Now, remember, the owner's going to work with these people. He has to be, he's going to work with them a day, for at least somebody has to say no. That's me. People don't like me after the transaction. They don't want to see me come back. No. Somebody has to say no, because buyers are going to come up with all their terms and conditions. We're at this sitting with our seller, who I represent, and I'm totally loyal to my client. Somebody has to say that's not going to work. And again, I'm out of the picture later. They have to work with this. There has to be some harmony, but there has to be somebody who's going to be very hard. The other factor is most clients don't know how to manage their lawyer. The most important person in this acquisition, in this process, is the accountant. However, accountants don't want to lose a client, so they throw up a lot of objections. Hey, I don't put it off for another year. You're paying me $32,000 or $31,000 to have an audit done of your 2 companies. Okay. But they are very important in providing the most valuable data. You have to know then how to manage your lawyer, because lawyers don't negotiate, they paper. So you have to know how to give your lawyer, if it's not the client, then it's me with the client saying, this is what we need done. This is the issues. Let's stick to the main points. No point getting into all these discussions. The phone for an hour so they can bill the client for another hour of time. Hey, another $600.
Right.
Stop. I say, stop. This is
You're
not essential. Send me an email.
Right.
An email, I'll respond back. Don't put me on the phone for an hour, or get your client on to have your fishing trip in Muskoka. Don't care. The lawyers are not deal makers. They paper deals. They don't negotiate. The client, the accountant in many cases, and me, will negotiate the deal. You have to know all these issues, representations, warranties, covenants. All of this is understood. Our client can be briefed. They can negotiate along with anybody. Most of these people are pretty sophisticated, but they don't know all those legal issues. So we keep the lawyer strict to the deal, our instructions of what we want. And there it is.
Amazing, Mark.
The market is so
you are
hot
providing such a service. Really?
Well, look, this is
where are you finding business, Mark? Where does your business come from?
Referrals. Look, Mark, I'm very active, as you know. I work 12 hours a day. I go home, kiss my wife, and I go back to work. So it could be a 16-hour day. I gave out 7,000 business cards last year. I go to trade shows. I want to meet people. There's a lot of people thinking about wanting to sell, but they're not ready for prime time. They're not ready. Number 2, many have expectations way beyond what's realistic. 3, some businesses are badly broken and can't really be sold easily. All of that's got to be taken into account up front. So you have to meet a lot of different people to determine what companies are viable to bring to market.
So of the 1,000 of the 1,000 transactions that say you've been in, like how many would have not actually transpired?
Well,
Like,
I mean,
in
there's
other words,
thousands and thousands, and there's many, many thousands of frogs that we've kissed that didn't turn into a prince. I mean, people that we've left by the sidelines. I mean, I've got probably 5 or 6, 700 groups that I stay in contact with saying, are you ready? Have you changed your views? Have you fixed your accounting system? So I send, emails out frequently asking these people, and many
wow,
people can't get their act together. Some businesses can't be sold because the owner hasn't done their homework.
that's amazing. And
There you
and
go.
w-
But
and
the
is are
M&A
you
market
across the
is very
country,
hot.
Mark? Do you
Of
work across
course.
the country?
So we work across the country. Look, there's so much activity here in Ontario locally that you
Sure,
don't have to
sure.
go. But we're working on 2 projects at the moment in Montreal. The Montreal market is very vibrant. The Toronto
Hmm.
market, Ontario market is very vibrant. And again, we're looking for companies that owners have thought this through. We've worked through the whole process. It's not hit and miss. It's a planned process.
And who's involved? Like, what kind of a team does a business owner have to have in order to make this thing work? Because I don't know. I meet so many
An
people who
accountant,
have,
probably
yeah.
an internal accountant.
Hmm.
An internal accountant. Look, many of these people have a bookkeeper or a very senior accountant. We don't want anybody in the company to know that you're contemplating selling. However, we may have to bring the internal accountant into the process and seek their trust to say we're going to need a lot of internal information because that's what's going to be asked. I recommend that owners not tell anybody within the organization. You know what happens? People stop working. They look busy, but they're politicking. They're talking to each other. They're all
Mm,
worried that they're going to lose their jobs. Do you know what companies buy? What a company buys? They only buy 2 things. Number one, they buy flow, and number 2, they buy management. And by the way, people are the most important part of the acquisition. I will tell you, me and everybody, 100% of the buying and investor groups will say, no matter how good the deal is, it could be spectacular. If we don't like the people, we don't do the deal. We move on. You can move on within the first 3 hours. You can tell. I mean, is there a chemistry with these people? Are we going to be able to live with them? Are we going to be able to work with them? If we don't like the people, move on. Stop.
got
So
it.
in many
And obviously,
cases,
from your,
I've met
yeah,
people that
obviously from
yes,
your experience, you know when to draw the line. You've been there, done that. You've done the dance.
yes.
How big, Mark? What would be considered a size of a deal that you would get involved with? Like from how small to how large?
Well, look, we generally have worked with companies that did $2 million to $10 million of EBITDA. Guess what? There's there's nothing shaking in that move. So to remain
Can you explain?
active,
Can
there
you
are
just
projects
explain?
that are
Just so,
smaller projects.
could you just explain? Like EBITDA is something I'm aware of, and you're aware of.
Earnings
Not
before
everybody knows.
interest, earnings before yeah. So earnings
And
before interest, taxes, and amortization. So that's a formula. So we take the
yep,
income, we add back the taxes, we add back the depreciation to come up with a real earnings number. That's called EBITDA. The vast majority of everybody today is trying to value businesses on a multiple of EBITDA. So let's talk about multiples. So let's say we're doing $1 million of EBITDA. That's a high number for many. More than likely, the valuation would be between 4 and maybe as high as maybe a little over 5 times EBITDA. So somebody's earning normalized $1 million, more than likely the value of that business will be between 4 times and 5 times. Those individuals who say we're looking for 6 or 7 times, stop. It's like my house is worth $1 million, but I want 1.8. What's the point? It's not going to work. So if they can't come to that realization, then we can't start. I ask everybody to get a second or third opinion on value from a learned individual that's not going to say, "Well, I put the numbers together. You should get 10 times or something." We see that frequently. I will ask them to get another opinion. They don't know me. They don't understand what technical skills I'm bringing to the table. I ask, get another opinion. Speak to a competitor. Maybe they can do a better transaction than I can. Speak to a learned individual who's doing some valuation. And preferably don't pay for it, because these guys are bandits trying to. I mean, they can do a very quick snapshot valuation for $8,000 or $10,000. No, it only takes about 4 or 5 hours, realistically, and they'll plug it into this big report. You can get how to do a normalization of income. If you go to my website, it's so simple. You can do it yourself practically. You simply add back the takebacks, add backs. So let's look, for example, we start with how many cars? Well, there's 7 cars. Well, under a normal circumstance, there would be 1 car going forward. We can add that back. So we've got people who do a lot of meals and entertainment personally. Gee, I've got guys who put everything on their company. So somebody spends $60,000 in meals and entertainment. Well, in a normal circumstance, there probably would be a budget of 10. So we're adding back another $50,000. Cell phones. We add back the taxes. We add back the depreciation. And then we say, okay, are the rents, you own the building, are you paying yourself fair market rent? No? Well, then we got to adjust that. That's a take back. What about salary? Well, you take $600,000 or $500,000 in salary to replace you. It's only going to be $150,000. So
You froze.
we've got goals. People don't realize that. People look at the bottom $100,000, but when we do all these add backs, it could be $1 million.
Wow. Mark, you're frozen. You know what? We're getting towards the end, so I'm just going to wrap up, Mark. Sorry, Mark, you're frozen again for a bit. So we're just going to wrap up. First of all, this has been fantastic. I mean, obviously, you have tremendous
Thank you.
experience and sophistication in this area, but you're also a good guy. And I realize that people who are looking for somebody, we should be talking as an estate planner myself, specializing in insurance. You know, when we do a full comprehensive discussion with our clients, we talk about succession planning. What are the plans with the business? You know, is there somebody, a family member? Is there a key person that you want to have take it over, or perhaps an employee labor force that's going to take it over? Or are you going to look at exiting? When would that be? You know, and if today was a good day and somebody wanted to buy your business, how much would that check be worth? These are all things that your planner should be going through, because obviously if you have that information, you can then segue to bring in somebody like Mark to help your clients really do something is probably going to impact their life in the biggest, most meaningful way, because it's likely their real net worth is built up in the private equity that they built up in that company. That's probably their biggest asset, is that business. So as a result, it really does require a lot of attention. What I want to do, Mark, is we've sold the business.
Remember,
you've gotten
there's
to that
something
place,
else called
and
management
I can imagine there's
management can buy out companies, and there's financing to back managers. Right. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of money looking for good people that are going to stay with the business. That's what people are buying. Management and people. The owner's going to work his way out, but there's no reason that the managers can't share or participate in the equity. Private equity groups they almost, in many cases, demand that the managers get incentivized in some way. They want them to participate in the equity. We don't want people leaving. You can't replace certain people. They say nobody's replaceable.
Right, you mentioned the assets, the people. Right, you mentioned the people
are the main asset.
Got it. Yeah. Okay, great. So I'd like to move on, just because we only have about another 15 minutes or now. Obviously you can go through this process and hopefully you win more than you don't win, but obviously there are times that it doesn't work out, and that's why you keep people sort of in the mill and stay in touch with them until perhaps it's a timing issue, until they're ready to go.
It is.
But now they've had their exit. And let's face it, the year that they have their exit, either selling a business or selling some investment real estate or selling a big, securities portfolio, is likely the year they're going to have their biggest payday. It's also going to be the year that they have their biggest tax bill to pay.
Correct.
Unless they've done some planning to multiply this lifetime capital gains exemption, etc. But it's also the year that you can be the most charitable to mitigate those taxes. And what I want to do is, like how often, Mark, we're just going to go through some things, but how often are you bringing this up with your people when they're selling their business? Like, are you talking to them about the fact that, and I know there are some people who are sitting on the ledge, not transacting in business because they know there's a big tax bill. If they knew that there was something they could do to mitigate those taxes and create some charity, maybe they'd be more encouraged to go forward. Have you had experiences where people are looking for?
Absolutely. That's part of the tax planning process up front. And we talk about philanthropy. And I mean, you've got to consider, and philanthropy is a big part of it. And when people learn the tax advantages and the benefits of doing philanthropy, but it's got to be targeted. I can't tell them who to donate money, but that's we weave you in and weave other advisors who can advise them on philanthropy and other tax strategies. But philanthropy is a big part of our discussion. Listen, you have no idea of how many people are as cheap can be. They wouldn't give you snow in the winter. And others who have a completely different perspective, who
Well, I
are,
think
when they hear this proposal,
yeah. I always
that
say,
what
Mark,
they
there's
can
two
do.
kinds of people. I say there's two kinds of people. There are those who are generous because it's part of
Yes,
their DNA. They
correct.
learned that at home or their church,
Yes,
their mosque, whatever. And then there are those people who are not. They just never got that education. When those people realize that they can convert taxes into charity and be remembered for giving money to charity as opposed to Ottawa, suddenly they become very charitable. We call them accidental philanthropists. And now
you
the
got
people
it.
who are already giving and they know that there's ways to mitigate taxes. They can now give more for the same cost or the same amount for less cost. So let's just go through a few strategies now for the people, and all this is kind of something I'll take the lead on here, but I love your commentary, Mark. So let's
Please
say
go ahead,
somebody
Mark.
sells a business, or they sell some investment real estate, or they sell a securities portfolio. So we had a situation where a family sold a business for $120 million, right?
Nice.
And yeah, very nice. They'd done some tax planning, and there was going to be a tax bill of $20 million. Not
Whoa.
bad. Family would have 100, 20 would go to Ottawa. They were prepared to write the check. Why not? You're still sitting with $100 million. But they got introduced to us. And what did we do? We explained to them how charity can be used to mitigate taxes. So what we did was we took $40 million of the 120 and we put
Mm-hmm.
it into a private foundation that we set up for that family. That $40 million created a charitable receipt that now turned that $20 million of tax into $20 million of charity. How lovely. The problem is G2, the kids, right? Now they're sitting there with 80 million as opposed to 100, right? And they're feeling like, what about us? What about us? So in that case, what we did was we used a life insurance policy to create a
Yes.
$40 million beneficiary to the family, and we structured it on a financing basis, so it was a cash flow neutral basis. So now the family would end up with 40 and the 80 that they have. And what we did was we took $20 million of tax and created $40 million of charity. So it was like moving the shells around, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing that people should be considering. So when you do have that sale, don't stop at just paying the taxes. Incorporate philanthropy. Very important message.
It's part of
So
the planning process. Mark, you do this very well. You know this. Why do
thank you.
more people do not? Less than 1 in 10 people I meet understand this. We have to educate these people because people are selling a lot of real estate. They are selling big portfolios and they simply file their tax return and are overtaxed.
and
Plan,
and, and if anything, it's
get
getting
counsel.
much worse. It's getting much worse. And they might have very good accountants, and if you're fortunate if you do, but often there are professionals out there who are more reactive versus proactive. So if you're not getting the advice that you need, please reach out to us. There are many very good people out there.
Absolutely.
And but let's say somebody's got a securities portfolio. Let's say they've got a company, and this is something that people don't realize. They're still giving cash and checks as gifts. But let's say you have a securities portfolio with inside your investment company, your holding company.
Yes.
So it would behoove you to go ahead and, instead of giving cash, donate in kind securities to either your own donor advised fund or private foundation or to a charity. And why do we do that? Because normally, if you have securities and you sell them, there is a capital gains now inclusion rate of 2/3, and you're basically going to, if it's over $250,000 of gains, you're going to be giving about 35% of those gains to Ottawa. But if you donate the securities in kind to charity, you pay no capital gains tax and you get a charitable receipt for the full value of that donation. But here's the part that people are not aware of. If you're
Tell
doing this
us.
corporately, let's say you have a portfolio of securities that you paid $1 million for and it's grown to 2 million. So you have a gain
Yes,
of $1 million. If you had
correct.
sold those, you pay $360,000 of tax. But if
Or
you
more.
donated them, now what happens is you don't pay any of that tax, but the gain, that $1 million of capital gain, gets credited to something called the CDA, the capital dividend account. And now that allows the shareholder to pull $1 million out of their company tax free. And
Right
if they would
on.
have taken $1 million out on their own, they'd give half of it to tax. And now they're able to get half of it, all of it out completely tax free. So we call something called the give and get. Um, we had a family that we met. They had $2 million of securities owned corporately, and those were earmarked for their children. They didn't want to mess with those, but they were very charitable. What we did was we set up a donor advised fund, and they donated from the company those $2 million tax free, because there's no, when you're donating in kind, there's no tax. So now they received a $2 million charitable receipt, did not pay $360,000 of capital gains taxes. And again, that allowed them to take $1 million out of their company and use the charitable receipt to offset other taxes over the next 5 years. Now, the family was out of pocket that $2 million. So then we used corporate insurance, and we used, corporate dollars to replace that $2 million to go to the kids. So in other words, everything was made beautiful, and they had this receipt for $2 million that they could use over the next 5 years to, offset other. So it's beautiful. What else?
It's
You have
brilliant. Why do people not know this? Why do people, the majority of company owners or any investors who are liquidating a portfolio, real estate, a business, this is not unknown. This is incredible information that people need to know, Mark.
agreed. And
We've got
donation
to let
of an
all
exist.
the advisors out there,
That's why we
advisors, your
that's why
colleagues
we
don't
have
know.
that's why we have Philanthropy Friday, and that's
Right
why
on.
I'm speaking to all these advisor groups and going out and speaking to all these foundations and heads of foundations. How about this? You might have an existing. Let's say you're going to sell a business, right? And
Yes.
Mark's helped you, and you might have an existing life insurance policy that you don't need. Okay, it could be that you bought it years ago. It's not going to move the dial on your planning. So we just did something for a hospital foundation where somebody had a $2 million life insurance policy they were going to
Okay.
cancel. They didn't need it. We got a fair market value donation receipt on that policy donation of $1.4 million. Why? This person was in their 70s and they were uninsurable. So they
Okay.
donated the $2 million policy to a hospital foundation, got the receipt for $1.4 million. That saves them $700,000 of tax, right?
Amazing.
And then they use that donation receipt when they sell their business to mitigate more of the taxes on that liquidity event. And they're recognized for giving $2 million to charity and look like a hero. And they've saved a whole bunch of tax for something
I
they were
want
going
my
to
name on the
cancel.
building. I want my
Well,
name on the building for my
in
$2
that
million.
in this
Bingo.
case, they did. They're actually having their
Fantastic.
name over
And they
something very
gave
cool.
to charity. They gave to charity. It's useful.
Exactly.
It's good.
Yeah. Last two things. I was instrumental in the creation of an insurance plan through Canada Life, where it was the first insurance policy created in Canada for charities. And the unique part of it is it's one premium. It's one and done. One and done. So imagine you've sold the business and you have a tax bill. So why not go ahead and create a one and done MyPar gift, either for your own donor advised private foundation or for a charity? And let's just say you have a $250,000 tax, right? Why not
Mhm.
take 500,000, right? Either of stock, preferably, or cash. donate that to the charity. There's no capital gains taxes. Use that to buy a one and done MyPar gift, which creates a gift of anywhere between 8 to 20 times larger than the net cost of your donation. And you've created a ton of charity, and you've saved taxes on that donation, and it's helped to mitigate the taxes on your exit. So again, just I call it going from success to significance, because you're really creating a legacy. Like, you're not going to spend all your money, so at least turn it into something that's worthwhile. Last thing, and I think this is really a very important point. Right now in Canada, TFSAs have exceeded RSPs. Did you know that, Mark?
I had not heard that. I'm
Yeah, so
surprised, but
so they've
wow,
they've exceeded
that's major.
RSPs, and so why do people have TFSAs? They have them because your money grows tax free. What's the only downside of a TFSA? You can only put in $7,000 a year. So
Correct, but
so if
still a
people
saving.
it is, but if people knew that they could have a TFSA for their business with no limit, that you could put as much money into it as you wanted, your money grows tax free. You can access that money tax free, and you can pass it along virtually tax free. Don't you think a lot of business owners would be interested in that?
They don't use it. I haven't
Right,
seen anybody. I mean,
right.
1 in 15.
Right. So
They
what that
should.
is, that's how corporate life insurance works. That's
Exactly.
exactly how it works. So again, there's no cookie cutter here. Everybody has a unique situation. You have to sit down with a professional and have it explained to you. So all those people that you're dealing with, Mark, and they have their exits or before their exits, we want to just try to create as much charity as possible to either mitigate the taxes before the sale so that they've got that, or create structures for after the sale, now that they've got their money, to keep more of that money for their family or for charity or both, and not have to write another big check to Ottawa, which I think people are feeling a lot of pressure around. So those are just a
Absolutely.
few ideas I wanted to share with you. I just wanted to sort of wrap up. First of all, Mark, it's been outstanding having you here today. You brought
Thank you. It's a
so
pleasure.
much, so much to the table, and I'm looking forward to listening to it again. I have something called the 48-hour rule. If something resonated with you during this hour together, do something about it within the next 48 hours. Otherwise, it won't get done. Next, connect with Mark Borkowski on LinkedIn.
Right
Send him an
on.
email. Mark, what's your email address?
Mark, MARK, at Mercantile, MERCANTILEMA.com. Mercantile
Perfect.
Ma,
Mark's a,
Mark at
yep,
mercantilema.com.
perfect. And Mark's available without any
Anytime,
obligation.
24/7.
20, except on Shabbos, not on Shabbos, but
Exactly.
otherwise he's available all the
Exactly.
time. And other thing, consider getting your MFAP, Master Financial Advisor in Philanthropy. It's a designation that was created through the Knowledge Bureau and CAGP, Inspire Philanthropy. I was on the faculty. There's actually a discount right now of 15% if you want to get it. It's a great time in the summer to acquire this designation. It'll certainly make you much smarter in the area of philanthropy. For those who really want to become experts, we have a mentoring coaching program called Power of Platinum, and our next group is starting September the 12th. We've had over 200 advisors through the program who've experienced tremendous success, not just at philanthropy, but high net worth life insurance sales, marketing, prospecting. It's a great investment. Our next Philanthropy Friday is going to be on August the 9th. I'm so delighted that I'm going to have Kevin Goldthorpe, who's the president and CEO of St. Michael's Hospital Foundation. He was actually the same president and CEO of Sick Kids Foundation, where
Hmm.
that's where we met, because I'm on the board there and also at St. Mike's. He's going to teach us and show us all the reasons why and how planned legacy giving and donations could be amplified with having more knowledge than just, as we said, giving cash checks and credit cards. Learn about what we've talked about. You know, do it yourself or collaborate. We work with professional advisors from across the country to help you as part of your team to be able to create more philanthropy and legacy for your clients and the charities you're involved with. But the one thing I ask is don't ignore it. There's far too much riding on the line, and it would be a tremendous loss. I feel like it's a responsibility and obligation that we have to raise the bar here. And Mark, you're obviously doing that. And I really want to just say thank you, Mark, for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mark. And I've been
Thank you, Mark.
grateful to have you on our team. And hopefully there'll be people who reach out to you, and hopefully we can have you on the show
Bring
another
me a
time.
deal. Reciprocity will be respected. We're looking for our next deal, as Mark is, as we all are. Bring me a deal. We'll work on it together. Thank you.
Perfect.
Mark,
Thank you
very much.
With pleasure. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Want to wish everybody a good weekend. Enjoy the rest of the summer. And to those, Shabbat Shalom. And thank you very much for taking the time today. And sorry for the technical problems when we started. Hopefully we'll get that figured out next time around. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.
We could start the video when we send the video back out. We could start from where it started from, maybe.
Beautiful. Okay, great. I'm just